Liam of Carcanne. A place to grow. Images of Liam's life passed through his dreams faster than he could keep up. Happy moments passed before his eyes at breakneck speeds. Birthdays, Christmases, summer cookouts. They all blurred as they swept past him in one continuous stream. The movie of his life finally came into focus on a familiar scene. His parents' annual 4th of July barbecue and pool party at his childhood home in Southern California. Everyone was gathered together near the pool, eating his dad's overcooked burgers and his mom's famous potato salad. As always, his cousins were laughing and carrying on in the pool, while his uncle sat on its edge with his feet dangling in the water. The mood was happy, but a cloud of sobriety seemed to hang over the party. It took Liam some time to notice that unlike all of the other moments that had reeled before him, there was something different about this one. It pained him to realize that the somber air of the party was because he hadn't attended that year, that he wasn't able to attend. There had never been a year he hadn't made it to the cookout, not since before he was born. There were pictures to prove it, so just what was he watching? As the question formed in his mind, the world around him began to shudder violently. He could feel everything shaking, but the surreal play unfolding before him continued. He watched as if through a shaky camera as his mother and father did their best to put on a brave face when talking to his sister. The three of them tried so hard to look happy while the others gathered for the tradition did their best to fill the hole his absence created. As the shaking around him grew worse, the scene faded further and further into the darkness engulfing him. The bright light of the morning sun blinded Liam as his eyes popped open. When he moved his hands to shade his eyes, the shaking stopped, and he felt a gentle pressure leave his shoulder. Blinking furiously, he forced his eyes to adjust to the sudden change and tried sitting up. His body was sore all over, and there wasn't a joint currently in motion that didn't feel stiff in some way. When his body finally sat upright, he felt it sway as if it were going to lay back down on its own accord, but a strong hand clamped his shoulder to steady him. "Here, drink this," a gentle voice said, as he felt a rough cup pressed into his hand. The liquid that splashed onto his fingers was cool, and instantly his dry throat craved it. Looking up to try and get a glimpse of whoever had given him the drink, Liam pushed the edge of the cup to his lips and took a cautious sip. The small drink of water felt great on his parched lips and throat, and immediately he took several large mouthfuls. Dropping the cup from his mouth, Liam finally got a good look at the person who had woken him from his fitful slumber. Blocking his view of the rest of the garden stood a short, balding man in what Liam guessed to be his mid-60s. He wore ankle-length brown trousers with a short-sleeved black shirt that buttoned in the front, over which hung a long vest of charcoal gray that ended somewhere around mid-thigh with pockets sewn into the front. With his clean-shaven face and squinting eyes, he gave Liam the impression of an old college professor freshly escaped from his office. "Slow down, no one's going to take it from you," the man said the way your father or grandmother might. "Thank you," Liam said, looking to the half-emptied cup. "I didn't know I was so thirsty." "Well, there is plenty more where that came from," the man encouraged. "Just maybe not so fast this time." "Again, thanks." Liam took a more reasonable drink from the cup. "So," the old man said after allowing Liam to finish his drink, "what brings you to my garden?" "I fell asleep here last night." "Obviously," the man sat next to Liam on the hardwood bench. "The question is, why here and not a bed in an inn?" Liam recalled his panicked late-night wanderings from the night before and felt himself shudder at the visceral memory of the previous day. "I have no money. I don't really have much of anything." "So, you sought the refuge of the church in your time of need." The man reached over and patted Liam reassuringly on the knee. "You're not the first to spend the night in this garden." "Can you tell me exactly where it is I am?" Liam asked sheepishly. He remembered the words of the merchants he had met on the road the day before, and he feared reigniting the confusion and panic their answers had brought him. "Do you not know?" The man looked at Liam with concern. People who sought sanctuary in the church usually knew they were in a church. Seeing the sincerity and worry on the young man's face, however, he tempered his voice in a kind and patient manner. "These are the gardens of the Church of the Goddess in Stassen." "Stassen," Liam repeated, a defeated sigh escaping his lips. "In Carcanne?" "Yes, in Carcanne. Should it be somewhere else?" He had meant the question to be humorous, but when he saw the concern deepen on Liam's face, the man again reached out and patted his knee. "Are you all right, son?" "I'm sorry, Liam responded between deep breaths. He reached up and wiped tears of frustration and fear away from his eyes. "I just don't know where I am." "Have you not heard of Stassen?" "No." "Well, that's simple enough," the man smiled reassuringly. "Stassen is the largest town on the Cardinal Road in southern Broadman." "No," Liam shook his head. The man's words were echoing what he had heard on the road the day before, and he found them less reassuring now than he had then. I don't know where I am. You mean Broadman? The man asked, disappointed that his last answer hadn't solved all the poor boy's troubles. Carcanne, Liam explained. I've never heard of it or any of the other places you're talking about. Well, the man said as Liam watched the confusion he felt spread across his host's face. Well then, we'll have to start smaller than that. The man got to his feet and straightened his clothes. He stood up straight as if suddenly interested in making a good first impression on the lost young man. Suddenly his hand shot out from his side, and with a big grin on his face, he spoke again. I am Father Denholm, priest and caretaker of this church and its believers. Liam looked to the man's hand for a moment before his manners caught back up to him. He reached out and took the man's offered hand and shook it firmly. Denholm returned the motion with a pleased expression on his face, as if Liam had passed a simple but important test. I'm Liam. Pleased to meet you, Denholm. Where are you from, Liam? Denholm released his hand and returned to his seat next to Liam, who finished off the water in his cup before answering. California. Liam decided in the moment it would be best to answer broadly. The likelihood of someone having heard of his home state was far greater than the likelihood of someone having heard of his hometown. Never heard of it, Denholm said matter-of-factly. Is it a large village? It's a state, actually. A state? The priest sought clarification. A state is a semi-autonomous region that, when combined with 49 other similar regions, makes up a whole nation. Liam watched as Denholm nodded along with what he was saying, but could tell the concept was foreign to the man. I'm from a country called the United States of America. Denholm tried to repeat it, but seemed to run out of steam a few words in. The United States of America, Liam repeated. Most people call it the U.S. or just the States for short. I'm afraid I've never heard of any of it, Denholm shook his head. I had a feeling you were going to say that. Liam sighed, and the two sat silently for a minute. Neither man was sure where to take the conversation next. Just as Liam was about to speak again, he was interrupted by his stomach. Apparently, the growl that came from inside of him was loud enough for Denholm to hear, because once it finished, Denholm invited Liam back to his home to continue their talk over breakfast. Rising from his seat, Liam turned to follow the friendly priest through the garden. In the bright light of the day, he could see that built along the east wall of the garden was what appeared to be a small cottage that sat behind the chapel. The statue must have blocked it from view the night before because Liam didn't recognize it. Looking back towards the stone giantess, Liam stopped and stared on in genuine surprise. Growing from the center of a stone ring, standing exactly where the statue had the night before, was a thin lemon tree. Is there something the matter? Denholm asked as Liam froze to the spot. What? Liam wiped his forehead and pointed at the tree before starting over. Wasn't there... There was a statue there, last night. Excuse me? Denholm asked. Last night, Liam explained, when I came into the garden, there was a statue there, a large statue of a woman. You're mistaken, Denholm said slowly, unsure of how to handle the odd outburst from the stranger. His voice took on a patient tone as if he was talking to a confused child. That lemon tree has been there for years now. No, that can't be right. Liam turned a slow circle, searching the garden for the statue from the night before. It was here. I know it was here. Denholm watched in silence for a moment as Liam seemed to be working through the disappearance of what he continued to insist was a large statue. Once the young man stopped turning and twisting in an attempt to see what was clearly not there, the priest approached him. He raised a hand to cut Liam off before his confused muttering could devolve any further. Come with me, the priest commanded and waved his hand in the universal sign to follow him. He gave no chance for Liam to argue as he changed course and headed for the front of the chapel. Stopping before the large double doors at the front of the building, Denholm produced a key from the pocket of his vest. With a practiced movement, he undid the lock and the massive doors swung inwards. He stepped to one side to allow Liam to see the room beyond. Inside the space was lit only by what little light had fought its way past the garden's walls and through the stained glass windows. In the dim light, Liam could make out rows of pews much like the churches back home, as well as unlit candelabras set at intervals between the windows. At the front of the room was an altar and podium just like he expected. On top of the altar, instead of a wooden cross, there was a statue of a young woman. Stepping into the dark room, Liam's attention remained glued to the figure. This woman was young, close to his own age, and had been captured in the middle of a dance. Her summer dress flowed about her as she spun on one foot. The other popped up behind her, perpendicular to the floor. She was spinning with arms outstretched in front of her, as if she was holding something they had failed to capture in the carving. On her was where the only direct light in the room fell, a myriad of colors from the stained glass painting her dress in vibrant hues. He was taken by the craftsmanship that had been poured into the carving. The way the cloth of her skirt folded and twisted around her body astonished him. The way the light was draping across her dress, he could feel the motion of her spin, as if at any second she would spring to life to complete her dance. His experience here was different than his time with the statue the night before, however. Last night, there had been an outpouring of emotion from the woman that had taken him in and removed his worries. Here, he was simply struck by the beauty of the piece of art before him, which for him was a miracle unto itself, as he had never had time for art in the past. "Is this your statue?" Denholm's quiet voice surprised Liam. He hadn't realized the priest had followed him into the room. No, it's not," Liam responded without looking back. "She's too young. The woman in the statue last night was older, wiser looking." "Older?" Denholm asked, and Liam nodded in response. "Yeah." He finally broke his stare and turned to face the priest. "Older. The two could be related. Sisters, maybe?" "Interesting." Denholm turned to head back out of the building, and Liam followed after him. When the pair reached the doors, Denholm left them open and continued on his original path back towards the cottage at the rear of the gardens. He remained lost in thought as the two walked. "You are sure she had her hand outstretched like that?" Denholm asked Liam as he set a small plate of food in front of him. The two men had entered the parsonage in silence as Denholm seemed to be turning some things over in his mind. After seating Liam at a dining table, the priest had set about making them a simple breakfast. As he cooked, Denholm talked to Liam about what led to him sleeping in the garden. At first, the young man had been resistant to give up too many details, but the old priest had such an easygoing demeanor that Liam found it hard to not talk to him. Still, he stayed away from his experience in the woods and only related the simpler story of how he came to be in the garden and, of course, the details of the statue. "I thought I was," Liam admitted, taking a small piece of bread from the plate. "Now I'm starting to wonder if I'm not crazy." "Because the statue is missing." Denholm sat across from Liam at the table and set a teapot between them. "Among other things." Liam turned the piece of bread over in his fingers. "I suppose the good news then," Denholm said, pouring himself a cup of tea from the pot, "is that your statue does exist." "It does?" "Yes." Denholm took a sip of the hot beverage before continuing. "I've never seen it in person, but there is a statue like the one you're describing at the Sanctuary Valley." "Sanctuary Valley?" Liam asked before finally taking a bite of his bread. It was semi-sweet with hints of rye and molasses. It was good cold, but it must have been amazing fresh from the oven. "The Sanctuary." Denholm looked across his teacup at Liam in a bit of surprise. "You've never heard of it?" "Is that really much of a surprise at this point?" "Good point," Denholm conceded. He began to speak again, but his train of thought seemed to be interrupted. "How do you know of the goddess and not of the sanctuary?" "I don't know about the goddess," Liam said around another bite of bread. He knew of several from courses on Roman and Greek mythology. He was familiar with Freya and Hel, but he didn't think Denholm's goddess was linked to any of those. "You don't?" It was Denholm's turn to be confused. "You don't know about the goddess, yet you came to her church for help?" "I saw a steeple in the distance. I assumed it was a church like the ones we have back home, I suppose." "Interesting. Where to begin, then?" "This is a church." "You know that already." It was a rare occasion these days for the priest to have to start at the beginning with someone as old as Liam. "This church is dedicated to the supreme goddess, creator of and mother to the world. The goddess is typically represented in one of three ways: as a maiden, a mother, or as the adjudicator. The maiden represents all of the wonder in the world, the beauty and splendor of nature, the fleetingness of life and youth. She's a soft and kind goddess in this form, but she can also represent naivety and misplaced faith, much the same way a young woman or young man might be naive and travel the wrong path in their life for a time. Her blessings come fast and intense like young love, but can fade quickly as she moves on. She dances instead of walks through life. She's the protector of the young and the innocent." "That's her on the altar in the chapel," Liam said when Denholm paused. "Yes, it is. The church here in Stawson focuses on the maiden. Her worship isn't as popular as it once was, so we're a small church. The mother is by far the most popular aspect of the goddess." "And that's who the statue is too? The one in the sanctuary?" "Yes. The mother is what she appears to be, the mother of the world. Creator of all of this." Denholm motioned around them with his teacup still in hand. "She is a strong woman, not as wishy-washy in her love or blessings as the maiden. Her love is constant and unconditional, if not nearly as passionate. She's not judgmental. That's the adjudicator, but she will put you in your place when needed. She protects everyone in the world that is otherwise left by the wayside, especially orphans and outcasts, and offers them help in their time of need." "Hence the outstretched hand," Liam nodded his understanding. "Precisely," Denholm confirmed. "You had no way of knowing what that statue looks like, and yet you saw it. You didn't just see a random statue in a random place, but a statue of the mother, in a place meant to worship the maiden. That's not a hallucination, that's a vision." "A vision." Liam did his best not to scoff out of respect for his host. He was not a religious man, nor was his family. The extent of his faith in any god back home had been watching Christmas movies and opening presents on December 25th. "Sure." Denholm took a sip of his tea before setting the cup on the table. "Is that so hard to believe?" I'm not exactly an avid worshiper of your goddess in any of her forms, Liam pointed out. Why give me a vision? To help you, the priest shrugged. Just because you don't believe in her doesn't mean she doesn't believe in you. As I said, unconditional love, pre-existing belief, would be a condition. Liam nodded his acquiescence. Denholm had a point there. The question is, why did you need her help so badly last night? Denholm refilled his teacup and offered some to Liam. That she appeared before you like that. Well, Liam took a sip of his tea before starting his story over from the beginning for his host. Another pot of tea was set on the table between the maiden's priest and the lost college student. This would be their third pot, but neither of them were keeping count. Liam and Denholm had been back and forth over his story from the day before, in detail more than once now. Denholm always seemed to have new questions for him with each retelling. Was the wolf in the city literal? Was his fear lifted at the gate to the garden, or only after meeting with the statue? And the goddess doesn't exist in your homeland? Denholm asked as Liam finished recanting the story for the final time. There are many religions. Some have goddesses in them, but I don't think any of them are your goddess, Liam explained. The most popular religion back home centers around the worship of an all-knowing creator god and his son. It seems to me that it's obvious your suspicions are correct, Denholm said after another moment of quiet reflection. There is no way this is the same world you were raised in. You really think so? Liam's voice rose with excitement that someone believed him. However, the feeling only lasted long enough for the horror of having his worst-case scenario confirmed to come crashing down over him. Of course. Your story makes no sense otherwise, and I believe your story. Denholm rose from his seat and started picking up the plates from their breakfast. The only question that remains is, how do we get you home? I have no idea. Liam sighed and leaned back in his chair. We don't even know why I'm here. Those stories you mentioned, the legends about others traveling to different worlds, how did they make it home? In most of them, they defeat some big evil and then are sent home by some kind of wizard or higher power or through a wardrobe. I know a few people with wardrobes, Denholm said jokingly as he turned back to face Liam in the small kitchen. As far as a big evil, I'm afraid we don't have many of those around these days. Carcanne is a pretty peaceful kingdom, and the king is a fair and kind ruler, as was his father and his father's father. That's good to hear, I guess. Liam rested his head against the back of his seat and looked at the ceiling. I'm sorry our kingdom couldn't be in a more ruinous state for you to save, Denholm said sarcastically. The priest was a sweet man, but Liam could sense a bit of smartass dwelling beneath the surface that he appreciated. I wouldn't know how to anyway. I'm not much of a hero. Well, then maybe you're not here to save the kingdom. Maybe you're just here. The priest's suggestion made Liam lift his head to look at him. Isn't it just as possible you wound up here by accident as it is you were brought here as some kind of grand design? I suppose so, but if it were an accident... Liam's sentence trailed off as his mind caught up to his mouth. It's going to be all the harder to find your way home, Denholm wrapped it up for him. Liam's head bounced against the back of the chair as he groaned out loud. He had suspected before laying down in the garden that all of this was true. He had even felt there would be no simple route for him to return home. Hearing it said aloud, however, just gave it that much more power. What am I going to do? His words were meant for the ether, but were answered by a priest. For now, Denholm said, picking up his cup of tea and leaning on a nearby counter, you can stay here with me, at least until a long-term solution presents itself. I couldn't do that, Liam said, sitting up in his chair and looking around the tiny parsonage. You barely have any space in here as it is. Besides, I'd feel wrong taking anything more from you for free. We can set up a cot in the woodshed. It's mostly empty this time of year, and we'll give you some privacy. As for payment, you'll help me with the garden and odd jobs until you find another way to support yourself. Liam looked at the stubborn look drawn across Denholm's soft face and gave in. He had nowhere else to go, no other way of surviving in this world. He stood and offered a hand to Denholm, who gladly shook it. Deal, Liam said with a nod. First things first, Denholm said after releasing Liam's hand from his. We need to get you some real clothes. Liam of Carcanne was written and read for you by Will Hansen. For more information on Liam, or any of Will's other works, please visit the Wooks Books Facebook page, Twitter, or YouTube channel. If you'd like to show your support, please like, subscribe, rate, and leave a comment where available. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to seeing you next time.